How did you decide when someone was irretrievably lost? When they were so evil or toxic or just plain set in their ways that you had to face the fact that they were never going to change? How long could you keep trying to save them? And when did you give up and grieve for them as though they were dead? I am Jan, welcome to my channel, and we are here to discuss the events of the Hammer of Thor, Book 2 in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard trilogy. Thor's hammer is missing, and it's up to our heroes to find and retrieve it from across enemy lines before giants storm the Nine Worlds and Ragnarok begins. Our story begins at the Thinking Cup on Newbury Street. Magnus and Samira are going to grab coffee and meet her informant when she has to leave on Valkyrie business. Magnus meets them on his own, and it's Otis the goat. He tells Magnus they have a clue on the whereabouts of Thor's hammer, in a White's burrow in Provincetown. Before he can say more, an assassin takes him out, and Magnus gives chase.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Magnus pursues them over several streets and tries attacking them. They warn him to stay away from Provincetown and slip away. He goes back to meet Samira and tell her what happened. Samira tells him how the giants threatened to storm Midgard if they don't find the hammer of Thor. Thor and his hammer are the only thing standing between the giants and humans. She explains how they'll need Hearth and Blitzen's help, and how they've been in hiding lately. She hints at issues at home and tells Magnus he'll meet her brother at dinner that night.
Who?
Back in Valhalla, Magnus finds his hallmates chasing down the new Einherji, who can shapeshift. They show him how the new guy trashed his room, where they find pottery with a symbol for Loki on it, and then they get distracted by lunch. Magnus stays behind and goes to his room. He thinks about his family, their connection to the gods, and how his uncle was currently branded with the same symbol for Loki. He tries asking Jack for any advice, but the sword only states the obvious. TJ shows up after lunch to get Magnus for battle practice to the death. At battle practice, they finally meet their new hallmate, Alex Fierro. She exchanges a few threats, and they dive into battle. Magnus recognizes her from the streets. She tells him she is gender fluid. They run into a lindworm, but it's one of the ancient ones, Grimwolf, who Alex says was sent by him. Magnus also gets a vision of Loki and Uncle Randolph. Loki wants Magnus to bring the bride and bride price for a wedding he has planned. He also tells him to bring Thor's hammer in exchange for the bride, Samira. He warns Magnus to not bring Alex. Then Alex decapitates Magnus to save him from Loki's hold. He has a dream vision about the day Uncle Randolph lost his family, and then another dream about Mimir talking to Hearthstone and Blitzen, and finally, a dream about an earth giant named Thrym arguing with his sister Thringa. He awakens back in his room, realizing that Loki meant to marry off Samira in exchange for Thor's hammer in only 5 days. He gets ready and heads to dinner. In the feast hall, Magnus fills in his hallmates on his dreams. Then they talk about trans folk throughout history before their conversation is cut short by the Thanes. They introduce Alex, daughter of Loki, and share her exploits before dying in battle. She is accepted, although the Thanes do use transphobic language.
Boo!
Magnus spots the figure in black from that morning, but they disappear as quickly as they had appeared. Magnus tells Samira, who goes to tell the Valkyries, but they turn up nothing. Samira and Magnus discuss Alex Fierro, and how Samira feels she relies on shapeshifting too much. Magnus then catches her up on what happened at battle practice. Samira tells Magnus how Loki came personally to talk to her grandparents, telling them everything. How she is the daughter of Loki, how she is a Valkyrie. She is really going through it this time around.
That's rough, buddy.
They both agree they need to find Thor's hammer before the wedding, knowing they'll have to visit the Whitesboro in Provincetown. She tells Magnus that they'll rendezvous with Blitzen Hearth at Cape Cod. The next day after breakfast, Magnus and Samira ride a flying horse to the Pilgrim Monument. Hearthstone explains why they went into hiding, because Blitz received a warning about bloodshed in his future before Ostara, the first day of spring and the day of the wedding. Blitz helps them find the entrance to the barrow, and Hearth uses a rune to get them inside. There they find themselves in a chamber full of mummified bodies. They open a sarcophagus and find a dead warrior inside, who promptly opens his eyes.
Shit, here we go again.
The zombie introduces himself as Geller, wielder of the Skofnung sword. He's a Draugr and must kill them, but cannot draw the blade in the presence of a woman, so he opts for using the mummies to kill our heroes. But the mummies are very strict about tradition and call a meeting before massacring them. Blitz uses this to distract the mummies into continuing to talk. Geller goes first, recounting his deeds and his weapons. Hearth is familiar with the Skofnung blade, for some reason. In the end, the Vikings vote to proceed with the killing. They make quick work of the mummies, and then Loki and Uncle Randolph show up. It was a trap to get them to free the Skofnung sword as a bride price.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Loki explains how he needed Randolph to wield the blade, as only those of noble lineage can do so, and the Chases are descended from Swedish royalty. But another caveat is that once the sword is drawn, it must taste blood. Loki also mentions that it's part of a set and is incomplete without the Skofnung stone. Then he has Randolph stab Blitzen.
No! God!
Magnus reacts by cutting some of Randolph's fingers off and having Jack go on autopilot. Blitzen is severely wounded, and the only thing that can heal him now is the Skofnung stone. Loki has Randolph try to take back the Skofnung sword, but is stopped by Jack. Loki tells Magnus to bring the sword and stone and the bride by the day of the wedding. So they have to go to Alfheim to find the stone. Hearth must face his fears in order to save the person he loves.
A brave man going in the line of duty like that!
They turn Blitzen to stone to preserve him for now, and take an Uber to the Provincetown airport to catch a flight. Samira calls in a favor to borrow a plane, and Amir is aboard. He's been worried about Samira and still very much cares for her. Samira flies the plane, and mid-flight the co-pilot Barry gets possessed by the goat assassin, who tells Magnus to meet them in Jotunheim and to seek out Heimdall, who can point them in the right direction. They also want Magnus to bring Alex Fierro along. Magnus, Hearth, and Blitz are all airdropped into Alfheim. They find themselves in a brightly lit version of Wellesley, except the houses are much bigger and grander. Alfheim police officers show up and harass our heroes before taking them to see Mr. Alderman, Hearth's father. Alderman is just as rude and bigoted as the officers were. He is dismissive of Hearth's use of ASL, refusing to see it in his presence.
You raggedy bitch.
He welcomes them into his home, is again quite rude, and tells them he will not give them the Skofnung stone. Magnus offers him a bargain. In exchange for the stone, he will do publicity for Alderman, and Hearthstone has to do something as well. If they want to beat the deadline, though, Hearth has to hurry. Alderman sends Hearth to his room, where we learn how Andiron was killed by a malevolent well spirit, how Hearth had to skin the beast, and how he must earn gold from his parents to repay a blood debt. Enough gold to cover the skin of the beast that killed Andiron.
That's rough, buddy.
Inge, the holder servant, mentions that they could steal the gold necessary from the careful one, the only dwarf in Alfheim. In the morning, they head out to find Andvari, who is disguised as a fish. After wandering through the woods behind Alderman's estate, Hearth and Magnus arrive at a cairn memorial to Andiron, where Hearth left his Othala rune and refuses to use it. Then they come across a waterfall. Hearth uses a Thurisaz rune to obliterate the water. After some searching, Magnus finds Andvari as a fish. He convinces the fish to turn back into a dwarf so they can talk. They convince him to give them his hoard of gold and his cursed magic ring. He warns Hearthstone he is only delaying the inevitable by doing so. Back at the house, they repay the blood debt, but it costs everything and the gold ring. They're given the Skofnung stone, which Hearth promptly uses to heal Blitzen. That evening, Alderman hosts a party with Magnus as his honored guest, but Mr. Alderman is behaving oddly and summons water spirits, Nox, to attack the guests. Magnus uses Jack, and Hearth summons a hailstorm with the Hagalaz rune. Together, Blitz, Hearth, and Magnus flee the party and use Jack to cut a hole in the 9 realms to escape. They wind up in Midgard in a building stairwell. Blitzen and Hearth agree to go to Nidavellir to rest up while Magnus meets up with Samira.
I think we should split up.
On the roof in front of the Boston Citgo sign is Samira along with Amir, Samira's chaperone Alex, and Alex's chaperone Halfborn. Magnus fills them in on what happened. Magnus also helps talk Amir through his panic over trying to understand the Norse world. Then the Bifrost Bridge appears in the sign, and Samira, Alex, Amir, and Magnus step through to meet Heimdall. He takes a selfie with Amir and Samira, and they convince him to find the goat assassin for them. He tells them he sees Thrym and Thringa in their underground fortress. He also spots Utgard Lanes, a bowling alley with signs for Magnus. They realize it can only be Big Boy, aka Utgard Loki.
You can't keep getting away with this!
Heimdall drops them on the corner of Charles and Boylston in front of an Edgar Allan Poe statue. They go over to the transportation building to have some falafel, courtesy of Amir. They agree to meet in the park the next day, and everyone goes home to rest for the night. The next morning, Alex and Magnus head out to Midgard. They visit Uncle Randolph's mansion in Back Bay. Thankfully, he is not there. They have an intimate moment together, realizing they have more in common than they first realized. Then Magnus spots a photograph of Bridal Veil Falls in New Hampshire, realizing it may be a clue to the wedding's location. They rendezvous with Samira, Hearth, and Blitz in the public garden in front of a George Washington statue. Stanley the eight-legged horse is there. They traverse the World Tree to go to Jotunheim. Alice, Magnus, and Blitz get separated from the others and run into a giant named Tiny. He agrees to help them if they carry his bowling bag for him to Utgard Lanes. They begrudgingly agree to carry the mountain-sized bag.
Are you kidding me?
Blitz uses his fashion knowledge to turn the bag into a magical bag using Jack, Magnus's hair, and Alex's blood. While Blitz sews, Alex and Magnus have another heart-to-heart moment. She tells him about her love of pottery and Loki being her mom, and how she fights to be her own person. Blitz finishes the bag, shrinking it to an easy-to-carry size. They rest for the night and arrive at Utgard Lanes in the morning. Samira and Hearth are there. They claim guest rights, and the giants shrink down closer to their size. Utgard Loki tells them they're on thin ice with the other giants and must earn their worth if they hope to leave the place alive.
Shit, here we go again.
The first contest is an axe throwing competition between Samira and Little Billy. Little Billy hits the mark on the dummy. Samira throws her axe at Little Billy, stating that he is fear itself, which never misses its target. Next goes Hearth, who challenges them to any arcade game. He beats them with ease in pinball. Then is Blitzen, who gives a giant a makeover. Utgard Loki then has Magnus and Alex team up for a game of bowling against the returning champions. The winner gets the loser's heads. They quickly realize that their bowling lane is not normal. It's an illusion. The lane leads to the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Magnus breaks the other giant's lane, but they're in the lead.
Might seem crazy, but you're just gonna have to trust me.
Alex and Magnus work together, and with the power of Frey, they're able to dispel the illusion and bowl more than 2 strikes, winning the game. Utgard Loki agrees to give them the information, but they only have 5 minutes. After that, the giants are free to chase them down and kill them.
Are you kidding me?
Outside, he tells them what Loki really wants, his freedom, and the bride price goes to the father of the bride according to Old Norse tradition. He wants the Skofnung sword to cut his bindings. Utgard Loki advises them to get good and do it themselves if they hope to find the hammer. Then their time is up and the giants give chase.
Oh, why do I have to run every 8 minutes of my life?
They run until they spot a tree and a beautiful woman urging them to hurry. Then they jump through a portal and wind up in a palace in Asgard in the presence of the goddess Sif.
Who?
She gives Hearth a new set of runes written on rowan wood. She also offers our heroes gold trophies for their help. Then she sends them downstairs to speak with Thor. The heroes fill in Thor on what they've learned and tell them how they plan to go along with the wedding to get the hammer, and Alex volunteers to be the bride. Blitz and Hearth are sent to Valhalla to gather reinforcements while Magnus, Alex, and Samira spend the night in Thor and Sif's home. The next morning, their wedding invitation tells them to go to a Taco Bell and await further instructions. They all get makeovers from Sif.
That's it. I did it. I'm a miracle worker.
Alex gets a wedding dress and a new garret made from Sif's hair, and they're also given Thor's chariot to ride to the event. With that, they're sent through another rowan tree portal. When they get there, they're told to head to Bridal Veil Falls. They arrive just as the secret cave entrance opens up. Thringa is there to greet them and guide them to the wedding. Thrym's fortress resembles a bar, the Bull and Finch pub, when they finally get to it. They eat at the bar and Thrym takes everyone to the real wedding location, the Cavern of Loki. There, Loki reveals that Uncle Randolph is his special guest, and then the wedding commences. Magnus is forced to give up the Skofnung sword and stone to his uncle. He also figures out that Thringa actually wants to seize power for herself, and then the hammer is brought out to help bless the wedding. Alex snaps when Randolph goes to free Loki. Everyone springs into action. Alex goes to attack Thrym with her Garrett. Magnus fights off the other giants with Jack. Samira throws her axe at Thringa, nailing her in the leg, and summons her spear to go after Uncle Randolph. Randolph breaks the rules and draws the blade in the presence of a woman,
What have you done?
causing the blade to slowly deteriorate. He cuts Loki's feet free and goes to sharpen it with the whetstone. Samira is stopped by Loki from attacking Randolph. When Thringa goes after Magnus, he uses the axe buried in her leg to incapacitate her for good. Randolph cuts Loki's right hand free and begins sharpening the blade again as Alex is finally knocked out by Thrym. Just then, Blitz, Hearth, and several Einherjar appear from a new opening in the cavern. They begin making quick work of the giants, and when all seems like the tide is turning, Randolph cuts the last binding on Loki, freeing the god of chaos. Before he can cause much havoc, the gods finally arrive. Loki takes the opportunity to flee, taking Sigyn, his wife, and Randolph with him. Thor, Heimdall, and Vidar, the god of vengeance, show up and secure the place. Back in Valhalla, they have a celebration, after which Helgi, the hotel manager, pulls aside Magnus, Sam, Alex, Blitz, and Hearth. He tells them that Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, had asked for them. Sam must recapture her father, who has fled to the eastern shores to complete Naglfar, and the others also have a part to play in apprehending him.
Not again.
The next morning, Magnus talks to Alex about how Samira must learn to resist Loki, and they have an intimate moment before Magnus leaves to meet Samira in Boston. At the Thinking Cup on Newberry Street, Samira spoke with Odin's Raven, who showed her a memory and a thought. A memory of her ancestor and the places he traveled. A thought of a plan to stop Loki by midsummer. They'll need to travel by sea, like the Vikings did. Magnus contacts Annabeth for advice, and they meet in New London, Connecticut. She's been dealing with her own share of problems involving Roman emperors. She tells Magnus it's time that he meet her boyfriend, Percy Jackson. When I first read this series, I did not care for Alex and Magnus, but this time I can't help but find them so cute together. Poor Hearthstone, having to deal with an abusive home life when he has to earn his parents' love. That's fucked up. And poor Samira, having her life constantly upended by her father, his meddling and manipulating just for his own twisted purposes. But I'm glad things worked out for now. Samira deserves a moment of peace, for crying out loud. Magnus grew a lot since dying and going to Valhalla. He has become more set in his ways of kindness and became much more open about his affection for his friends. He's learned not to feel ashamed to be a softie. It's who he is. But that's all I really have to say. Another great adventure from Rick. I'll catch you all in the next one when we recap Ship of the Dead. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already to catch up on the latest book recap. Bye!
Bye.